So the blues popped up in various places throughout the country. Um, W.C. Handy is quoted as being, or acknowledged as being the father of the blues, not because he invented it, but sort of because he discovered it. Um, he was waiting for a train in Tutwiler, Mississippi in 1903. The train is already 11 or 12 hours late, and he sees this guy come in with a guitar and a ramshackle bass, and they're playing something, and the guy keeps saying, "I'm going where the Southern crossed the dog," right? And W.C. Handy, who was an African American musician, but was sort of classically trained, a brass man from Florence, Alabama, said it was the strangest music he'd ever heard. Well, that meant that chances are that music was around for 5, 10, maybe 20 years. Nobody knows. That music had started to develop even before then in Mississippi. And so you have this pockets of this music showing up in Texas and Mississippi and Georgia and Alabama. It's more sacred, but it's still around, right? So wherever you have these black communities that combine the traditional music that they maybe sang in church along with work songs, with field hollers, it's sort of before the turn of the 20th century congeals and becomes the music we call blues. So, in the Mississippi Delta tradition than in the Texas tradition, which is what we've looked at in previous lessons, we get an artist like Robert Johnson. Robert Johnson is important for a whole bunch of reasons. First of all, he is a young man who sat at the feet of some of the older Delta blues artists, guys like Son House and Willie Brown and Skip James. And he was like a sponge. When he would hear a style, he would incorporate that into his style. Supposedly, he had a photographic memory when it came to music. So he could hear stuff on the radio, too. He heard somebody like Lonnie Johnson or Scrapper Blackwell playing styles that we associate with more urban styles. He would hear somebody like Skip James coming out of Bentonia, Mississippi, which is another kind of obscure country style. He incorporated that into his music. So with Robert Johnson, we've got like the ultimate gateway musician into the music of the Delta. But also, his influences go forward. So people like Elmore James, Muddy Waters, and so many others count, Keith Richard, so on and so on, count Robert Johnson as an influence. For many years, Robert Johnson's music was somewhat of a mystery. Nobody knew what he looked like. Nobody knew, exactly how he made it. Some people thought it was two guys playing instead of one. And as we kind of, in the 21st century, start to unfold or unpack his music, we find out that his music is so influential even to this day that if we get into this idea of taking these modules of ways to do a song, that call and response is still there, but it has a more uniform, compact, and in fact, modern sound to it than maybe some of the artists that we've talked about in previous lessons. So this time, I want to take one of his well-known finger-picked pieces in standard tuning called Kindhearted Woman. And this is a song that once you learn the chassis, I love this idea of learning the chassis of a song. Because frankly, if Robert Johnson recorded 50 songs instead of 29, they would probably all basically be along the same chassis. It's like a writer. Think about this. We've got 26 letters in the alphabet, and we've got a limited number of words in the dictionary. And if you're writing in English language, Steinbeck and Danielle Steele and Marvel Comics and William Shakespeare, they're all using the same vocabulary, but they use it differently. So that the minute you pick up of Mice and Men, or the minute you pick up East of Eden, you know you're reading Steinbeck. You don't mistake it for Danielle Steele. You don't mistake it for Hemingway or something else, right? He has a certain way of presenting his story. Well, so does Robert, so does Lightning Hopkins, so does Blind Lemon Jefferson, so does Son House. So I want to get a little bit into the language or the feel of Robert Johnson. This is also an opportunity for us as modern musicians to take a little bit of Robert. You know, we don't necessarily have to play a Robert Johnson song the way Robert Johnson played it to be influenced by Robert Johnson. So we'll look at his basic chassis for the song Kindhearted Woman.